Braddock had come over with his army of 1,500 men, and they really thought it was going to be a slam dunk. They thought they would take Fort Duquesne, and that would be sort of the end of the French and Indian War. And that is not what happened.
Located less than 100 miles from each other, stretching from West Virginia into Maryland and Pennsylvania, Fort Ashby, Fort Cumberland, Fort Necessity, Fort Ligonier, and Fort Duquesne are magnificent sites that this summer one could spend the weekend exploring the history of the early settlers who built this country.
Many American Indians who had lived on the land for centuries saw the French and British as a threat.
Wars between the French, British, and American Indians for control of the Allegheny Valley and the forks of the three rivers, now modern-day Pittsburgh, which is a major fur trade route, made the western frontier a dangerous place to traverse during the years of the French and Indian Wars. Many people lost their lives in the pursuit of the stronghold, Fort Duquesne, now Fort Pitt, a strategically important fort built by the British in 1759. After capturing Fort Duquesne, it was named after William Pitt the Elder, the British Prime Minister at the time.
Why is this important to the story of America?
And the forts were necessary to protect the men and women whom inhabited the land from attacks by native inhabitants whom believed this land was theirs. Native American tribes were in constant battle over the land of this region as native nations won over hunting rights through conflict, and Europeans' newly formed presence made this region a breeding ground for even more conflict.
Hey everybody, it's Steve from Exploring the American Frontier, and we are here at the old site of Fort Cumberland down in Maryland, and looks like a lot of these things is a trending that some of these forts are being turned into churches. We are here at Fort Ashby. Fort Ashby, one of the chain of Indian forts built by George Washington in 1755. Sharp fighting here in 1756. In 1794, troops under General Daniel Morgan camped here on their way to suppress the Whiskey Rebellion.
The Catawba, Shawnee, and Lenape Indians disputed over property to gather and hunt. They would trade with the French fur pelts, which was then sent back to Europe to furnish the expanding European thirst for high-quality American furs. Think of the fur trade akin to today's modern oil market, a high-valued commodity which some feel was worth the lives to be taken.
When the Indian trapper of North America first exchanged his pelts for the manufactures of the Old World, a new chapter opened in the modern fur trade. In this trading, all values were reckoned not in silver and gold, but in the skin of the beaver. So highly did the Europeans prize its rich brown pelt.
To hold these precious pelts, beavers were a great number of pelts traded, but fox, deer, bear, and other animals made great profits because of the warmth they gave during the long winter months of the 18th century frost. These forts gave settlers the area to post in safety and were early representatives of the cities which would later be built along the roads being carved into nature's abode in the Alleghenies. A non-fortified mind gives a misconception of victimhood that looms across the narrative today. Many feel that Indian lands were stolen during this time period, but the truth was these tribes had been slaughtering each other for control over this territory dating back to the early woodland age, which more peaceful and now extinct tribes cultivated around the three rivers in the Potomac. The Erie, Monongahela, and Susquehanna tribes are examples of Native American tribes that Iroquois and Algonquin-speaking tribes massacred and absorbed and relegated into non-existence. There is no room for peace within the walls of American culture, as America has seemed to be at war long before the arrival of the first Europeans for control and power. The Iroquois, made up of powerful tribes, had their influence spread, forming an alliance in which many Native American tribes like the Delaware or Lenape Indians began to adopt their languages and values. A melting pot since its inception, no one Indian nation reigned supreme, but the influence of the Iroquois became a great bastion of influence across the Allegheny frontier during this time period. When the Europeans arrived, they found this to be true and formed alliances with them. But in the art of war, no one is to be fully trusted, and the English were notorious for breaking the treaties, which, for buried moments of time, held peace enough for the Europeans to head west into the Alleghenies and Ohio Valley. No one group was to blame for the atrocities committed on the frontier, but all had their hand in the war at one point or another, fighting for land, their culture, and for influence over the fertile ground the Great Spirit gave to the mighty land of America. The debate remains today if colonial influence had been detrimental influence over the Indian Empire. But the question is to be asked if it wasn't the Europeans who would have conquered this country as the evolution of ages grew more advanced with the introduction of metallurgical technology. No doubt an effective tool, but in the wrong hands, guns and knives today open debates on their utility. The right to bear arms is one of our oldest constitutional rights in America, and the right it has given power to the individual to stand against tyranny and corruption of the state that would undoubtedly, as our Constitution has made evident in the Second Amendment in the United States Constitution, it states, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. This means the government cannot infringe on the right of the people to keep and bear arms, a right seen as crucial for a free state. If we can keep a sound mind and accept our gifts of great wealth and the land that we possess today, one that the dirt of the fields provide life for an order that knows not what to do with it. So today be thankful for your freedoms and the right to debate who was right or wrong. Many lives have been lost in wars well before the invention of firearms. In a perfect world, we could live in harmony, but the nature of men is to conquer. And in this matter of one's heart, of the men who seek power, we shall feel blessed to hold the fort of our own accomplishment, much like the grandfathers who built these now non-existent, except in memory, in an effigy, great forts of the past. So what are you waiting for? Get out there and explore.
Thanks, guys.